Cabron, I need to see you a boss.
I think it's safe to say that me and the MCU no longer see eye to eye. As soon as Endgame was over, my reaction to the whole franchise could basically be summed up as the franchise that I have been invested in from my teenage years through to my young adult years, oh my god, I'm getting old, had come to a satisfactory, if somewhat messy conclusion, and I wasn't really all that interested in seeing more from it. I'd occasionally glance over if anything of particular interest came out, like No Way Home, which was pretty good, even if it did get a little key-jangly for my taste at times. Everything else from Phase 4 and beyond? Yeah, not really my cup of tea. Things like Black Widow and Shang-Chi just don't really do it for me. And while I am a fan of the Eternals, I had a distinct feeling that Marvel wouldn't do it justice on the big screen. I was right. I am also a huge Moon Knight fan. I was into him well before the MCU was even a thing, so I was a little bit excited when the Disney Plus TV show for him was announced. What a shame then that the show takes so many creative liberties that it might as well be about a completely different character, cause it sure as shit isn't a Moon Knight show. So there's not much for me to stick around the MCU for, right? I thought the whole franchise had a decent enough ending with Endgame, and Iron Man and Captain America are both gone, and they were both some of my favorite characters in the whole franchise. Not a whole lot for me to dwell on, except...
Is he asleep?
No. I'm pretty sure he's dead.
Look out! Bruce.
Yeah, Hulk and Thor. While they were never my favorite characters in the MCU, I always thought they were pretty cool. Even in the comic books, I'm a big fan of both of them. So why exactly am I talking about them here? Well, as you might have guessed, they've both gone pretty far downhill. Thor in particular has one of the most dramatic transitions. I mean, if you compare him from Thor 1 and Thor 4, he's like a completely different character, going from a mostly serious but occasionally dumb and funny himbo to a big dumb clown man.
And flick! Oh! Flick too hard, damn it!
It's probably hard for people to understand these days, but there was a time when Thor was kind of the black sheep of the early MCU. His first movie was kind of the poster child for incredibly generic Phase 1 Marvel movies, and the second Thor movie is generally regarded as one of the worst in the entire franchise, so he has that distinction going for him. Despite being the movies that introduced a lot of really outlandish concepts to the early MCU, the first two Thor movies were incredibly dry, really boring in some respects too, and the only noteworthy thing they brought to the table was Loki, much to the delight of thirsty fangirls everywhere. By the time Ragnarok rolled around, it seemed that the character needed some kind of reinvention in order to justify his overall prominence in the MCU, and by that point, Chris Hemsworth had a sort of epiphany when it came to his career. He wanted to play up that dumb himbo shit for all it was worth and essentially become a golden retriever in human skin. I think we have Ghostbusters 2016 to thank for that. That movie's like a Lovecraftian curse. It seems to just linger long after death. The end result is that Thor Ragnarok, directed by Taika Waititi, proved to be a much more light-hearted movie than the previous two Thor flicks, and while some would argue that it's a little too jokey at times, I feel it strikes a decent enough balance between action and comedy. Yeah, there are some moments when characters could have shut their fucking mouths and not cracked a joke off, like Korg deciding to flap his gums while Asgard was being destroyed.
It will become a haven for all peoples and aliens of the universe. Now those foundations are gone.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
But then there are other moments like Odin's passing that are pretty somber and dramatic in tone. It really did wonders for Thor as a character, making him feel much more lively and interesting than any previous MCU movie ever had. And Taika, to his credit, before he ended up making movies so goofy that even a goofy movie looks positively goddamn normal in comparison, managed to add both levity and gravitas to Thor as a character. A lot of light, humorous moments to make him a lot more relatable to the audience, coupled with some pretty serious character drama that ended up making him grow into the natural role of a leader. Thor losing an eye at the end of the movie, mirroring the way Odin in mythology had to sacrifice an eye to gain knowledge. It's, well, not exactly subtle, but it is a good way to link Thor and his father. That's the last nice thing I'm really gonna say about Taika Waititi, at least when it comes to Thor. With everything Ragnarok had set up, making Thor out to be a leader on the level of his father, or at least set to grow into that role, I wonder what Infinity War did with all that setup.
Thank you, sweet rabbit.
Oh.
Huh. Now, I'm not gonna come out with any crazy takes like Infinity War bad, or anything like that. It's one of my favorite movies in the entire MCU canon after all, and Thor is definitely one of the highlights of it. But it did always kind of rub me the wrong way that the movie gave Thor his eye back so quickly and just kind of papered over the whole thing. It was kind of a big deal in Ragnarok after all. Yeah, I've heard a few mixed reports about the eye patch from Ragnarok, and well, apparently it was a pain in the ass to wear during the movie itself, so they ended up using a CG one, which is all well and good if you're only doing it for a few scenes. But if you had to CGI part of someone's face for an entire movie, well, yeah. This is a pretty minor nitpick, of course, and like I said earlier, Thor was great for most of Infinity War, so clearly things could only go from strength to strength with Endgame, right? Right? Wrong! Right. Fat Thor. How could I forget? Now, of course, the idea of Thor being PTSD-stricken and depressed after everything that had happened to him between Ragnarok and Infinity War and beyond is entirely rational and understandable as a character choice. What's a lot less understandable is how it's presented to the viewer, like how it constantly flip-flops between it being something funny and something dramatic. I know you have it in you to commit to it being dramatic and serious, so why don't you? Please explain, Disney. Please. And this is only like tangentially related, but I feel a need to mention it anyway, but Scarlet Witch losing her imaginary children, the equivalent of accidentally deleting her Sims save file, that's treated as incredibly tragic and moving and deep for the character, and it's treated with the utmost seriousness. To the point where the MCU itself and the entire fandom bends over backwards to justify her being an even worse monster than Thanos at his absolute worst.
Please. I have children of my own. I understand your pain.
Is their mother still alive?
Yes.
Good. There will be someone left to raise them.
But Thor losing his family, his eye, his kingdom, his home, his friends, and half of what remained of his entire race, that's just a case of, haha, look at the funny fat guy? Is that the standard we're going with, Disney? Okay. And then after spending all of Endgame being a big old goofball, Thor decides, you know what, I don't want to be King of Asgard anymore, because reasons. I know we have to pretend Thor 1 and 2 didn't happen, but they did happen, and being King of Asgard was kind of a big deal for his character, but whatever. And then Thor could think of nobody better to inherit the remains of his kingdom than Valkyrie, the alcoholic slaver. And there was nobody else available, I guess.
That's right, Sam. I'm too old to be Captain America now, and there's only one person I can think to give the shield to. Crossbones.
You've got to do better.
But frankly, everything that happened to Thor is chump change compared to what the MCU ended up doing to the Hulk. At least Thor got to do some cool things in Endgame. From the early days of the MCU up through to Ragnarok, the Hulk basically had one function. Whenever he was on screen, something cool was gonna happen. He was the big tough guy who always got to kick ass.
Puny god.
Suffice to say, old Bruce Banner had a whole lot of Black Air Force energy back in those days. Am I using that term correctly? Please, there are several men outside my house with baseball bats that are gonna beat me to death if I don't use that term correctly. Which perhaps made it all the more shocking when Thanos effortlessly kicked the shit out of the Hulk in the first couple of minutes of Infinity War, firmly cementing him as a major threat. The audience was left waiting for a rematch, hoping that the Hulk would get his round 2 with Thanos sometime in the near future. And then Endgame rolled around and revealed that, off-screen, Bruce Banner and the Hulk had merged into one person. Would have been nice to see any of that happen, but okay. And the Hulk, well, he didn't get to fight Thanos at all in Endgame. He really didn't do much of anything at all. He got to do the reverse snap, and that's about it. And the few times he's appeared since then, he's become less and less impressive.
I put the brains and the brawn together. And now look at me. Best of both worlds.
Yeah, I don't know about that, pal. You're a lot less physically impressive than the old Hulk, and I'm starting to feel you're not as smart either. I mean, I'm not the kind of guy who wants to get into in-depth power scaling discussions or whatever, but I'm pretty sure Avengers 1 Hulk would absolutely murder Professor Hulk in a fight. Yeah, nothing says strongest man on the planet quite like getting flattened by a fucking Jeep. You know what, in retrospect, I'm pretty glad Cap and Iron Man got out when they did. I shudder to think how lame they'd be if they'd stuck around for this long.
You've got to do better.